Chapter 28. The Monopole and the Tree. The story of the oak tree was unremarkable until it met the meteorite. The bowling ball-sized meteorite's story was likewise unremarkable until it met the tiny magnet. The story of the magnet, however, was remarkable from its very beginning. It wasn't large, only about the size of a sugar cube. Like most truly powerful things, its size wasn't what made it special. What made it special was what it was. What made it special was inside, the part that no one could see. Inside this unique magnet was a gateway to billions of worlds. It was born 13 billion years ago when the universe was still very young, and there was enough energy in a small enough volume to turn this tiny piece of liquid iron inside out. While it cooled, it trapped the powerful magnetic field swirling around it. Since it was inside out, it only had the south pole of its magnetic field protruding into our three-dimensional universe. The remainder of it, its north pole, opened into universes too numerous to count. As it floated in the vast and expanding volume of space, it encountered many objects of many types, never staying with any for long before moving on, alone, in the void. 2 billion years passed. Small stars formed and cooled. Massive stars formed, burned briefly, and exploded. One such star, a yellow supergiant, reached the end of its life in a supernova bright enough to be seen on the opposite side of its galaxy. During the explosion, it ejected a small piece of hot, liquid metal. By stellar measure, it was tiny, only about the size of a bowling ball. The star had thrown off many such pieces of iron and nickel, but most were headed in the wrong direction to meet the magnet as it passed by. In all its travels, the tiny monopole magnet had never come close enough to connect with another piece of iron. Many came and passed, moving too fast to be pulled together. This one was different. This rapidly cooling blob was moving at just the right speed, in just the right direction. It approached the magnet from behind. They were both moving at high velocity relative to the surrounding maelstrom, but their speed compared to each other was slow. The chase ended after only 2 years, a blink of an eye for the young universe. Upon contact, the magnet became embedded, but not completely, inside the larger piece of metal. As the now complete unit finished cooling, it became a single, larger monopole magnet. Nothing much happened for the next 7 billion years. It drifted in and out of galaxies. It grew a beard of iron slivers, which it encountered at just the right speed to accumulate on its surface. They stood out with one point on the smooth surface and the other pointing out into space. It occasionally passed gravity wells close enough to change its course and speed, but usually not by much. That all changed on a hot summer night over Northwest South Dakota. The magnet entered Earth's atmosphere at a gentle angle and began to slow. The first thing it lost was the spiky beard of iron slivers. Its surface began to glow as it heated from the friction. It left a trail of smoke and steam in the humid air as it descended and slowed. Unlike stone meteors that break apart in a spectacular display as they enter the atmosphere, this iron and nickel meteor came in at just the right angle to remain intact. Not only did it survive the trip through the atmosphere, but it also slowed to a leisurely 100 miles per hour. The oak tree had just grown its new leaves for the year. The warm days had grown longer. The tree was nearing the end of its long life. It was large, over 100 feet tall, with lower branches larger than the trunks of the neighboring trees. More than one scar with the initials of more than one young couple adorned its bark. Some of these carvings were so old that their artists had already passed from the earth, forgotten by all but the tree. The meteor streaked through the sky and collided with the tree's trunk 30 feet above the ground. The tree shook violently, and it lost half of its new leaves. The upper branches swayed like an inverted pendulum. When it finally came to a stop, it had a new piece of jewelry embedded in its trunk. Sap oozed from the wound at the point of impact. It sizzled and solidified on contact with the hot, black lump. The next day, the tree immediately began growing new leaves to replace those lost by the violence of the night. In the afternoon, a gentle rain fell, and its parched roots drank. The rainstorm became a thunderstorm. The gentle breeze became a gale. Each lightning strike grew closer. The rain slowed. The air around the tree became charged with static. The leaves that remained, now wet and charged with electricity, reached for the sky. The first slender tendrils of a spark formed, followed quickly by a white-hot rush of current as lightning struck the tree. It sought out the iron monopole magnet and flowed through it. The amount of energy was immense, and much of it flowed through the monopole and out of the tree's universe. As energy poured out, it swept the magnet and the tree along with it. The next day, visitors to the bank of the river found a hole in the ground instead of their favorite shade tree. The hole, or rather holes, as there were several, were shaped exactly like the subterranean branching of the tree's roots. The fragile tunnels in the dirt caved in easily as the growing crowd of curious spectators examined the scene. No broken branches or smoldering remains were found to explain the disappearance of an entire oak tree, and soon legends grew about the missing tree. Years passed, and the legend of the tree receded in the memories of those who had heard the story. Young people, not yet born when the tree disappeared, assumed it was a tall tale meant to warn them of the dangers of playing by the river. Any doubt was erased on a dark April night. At 3 a.m., the people closest to the river awoke to a boom as the tree returned and struck the surrounding air like a bell. It was much later that day before anyone ventured down to discover the source of the disturbance. Most of the landscape was still winter gray. There was even some snow stubbornly refusing to melt in the shadowed contours of the earth that saw no sunlight. The other trees in the area had only just begun to bud. The oak tree had not only returned from its journey, but it also sported a full set of dark green leaves. It stood out like an emerald in the bleak landscape. As the tree's reputation grew, curious people from hundreds of miles away came to see it for themselves. They came and went, unimpressed by a tree that seemed no more out of place than any other. Within 6 months, it had disappeared again, this time in the middle of the night. Another storm, another lightning strike, and off it went to points unknown. Once more, people told the amazing story, and once more, others came to see for themselves, and left disappointed after being shown nothing more than a piece of muddy ground near a river. The arrivals and departures of the tree seemed random, but for two constants. It always left during a storm, and if it left during the day, it would only return at night. As it repeatedly ventured and returned, its reputation grew. Many theorized and embellished the story. More than one said that it was unnatural, and therefore the work of the devil. Talk of chopping it down never grew beyond just talk, mostly due to the intense fear of it that had taken hold of the population. Most people kept a respectable distance from it when it was present, and someone even took it upon themselves to mark the ground nearby when it was gone, a reminder to everyone to stay away. Over the years, it became a rite of passage for young children to venture close enough to kiss the trunk before running back to the safety and the newfound respect of their peers. One particularly courageous boy climbed it to the highest branches and returned with a story of an odd black rock embedded in its trunk. He claimed it snatched his belt by the buckle and wanted to hold him there as its prisoner, forever. He never returned to the tree and became one of the most vocal supporters of the plan to chop it down.